So for a while, I chased realism in Blender. I tried to make everything look as realistic as possible, and in particular, I tried to make massive nature scenes with mountains and lakes and stuff, and it never worked. I failed miserably, and I kind of just gave up. So I started making stylized objects like this. And recently I had a thought. This, it looks okay, the composition is okay, but what does everyone look at? Everyone looks at this subject. And around the subject is depth of field, lots of blurs, lots of bokeh in the background and in the front. So if I just replaced this stylized grass with realistic grass, and the rock with a realistic rock, and the moss with realistic moss, everyone would still look at this glass, and a lot of it would still be blurred. So even if it doesn't look perfect, it would look passable. So today I'm going to take this scene and I'm going to make it realistic-ish, I guess. So I'm going to start by selecting this bottom plane, which has all of these layers on it, which is all the grass, and I'm just going to remove them, which is quite simple. And I'm going to go to the library, and I'm actually just going to start with some orchard grass big. With level detail, 0 is the highest detail and 2 is the least detail. Of course this will be mostly blurred, so I don't need perfect detail, but I'm actually going to put it to 0 because it is fairly close to the camera and you might notice. You can see in the background here there's not much of it, so I'm going to increase the density up quite a bit. And you can see it slowing down. I'll go to solid view. I'm going to go to my scale, and since we are scattering small orchard grass as well, I'm going to put the minimum scale up to 0.5 or something like that, which will make everything bigger. Set the main scale to 2. We need it to be a bit bigger than this. This is getting very slow, so I'm going to set the distribution to 5, something reasonable. That's better. I'm going to add the small variant of the orchard grass as well, and since I set the distribution of the large one to 5, I'm going to set the distribution of this one also to 5, and the scale to a minimum of 0.5, and the main scale to 2. Now we can see this is the small orchard grass and this is the large orchard grass. You can see the difference in scale, but I've got an issue, it's clipping into the rock, so I am going to go back. I'm going to add an effect layer. It's going to be proximity, and this proximity is going to be to this rock. And now you can see it's applied in the small orchard grass, and I can go to my large orchard grass and I can go to proximity. I'm going to add it proximity. So now if I go back to that, you can see it doesn't clip inside of the rock. But what we can see is this stops at the top of the mountain, which is something I set up earlier. It's not a mountain, it's just a small bump, and it is under the optimization and camera culling. So in here you can select your camera, and you can select the focal length of the camera. You can see a lower focal length opens up more space, and a higher focal length closes it in, because that's how zoomed in your camera is. You can change your camera's focal length in this menu down here and go to focal length right here, and then you can choose how zoomed in you are. I like something quite zoomed in because it allows you to get a nice depth of field effect, and it looks more like a portrait than, you know, an FPV camera fisheye lens. So I'm going to change that focal length not quite to 266, because I'll show you what happens if I set it to 266. The border here looks a bit rough. If I go to render view and I allow these to be seen, the border always looks a lot thinner than it needs to be. So if I set this camera culling to 250, it just gives that little space so plants that are on the seam can lean over into the edge, and the edge doesn't look like there's nothing on the other side of it. Now, another optimization thing, I'm going to go to my viewport display and I'm going to set that to 50%. That just means that we'll see half the amount of the plants in the viewport than the amount that will get rendered, because that will let us run a lot more smoothly than otherwise. Now, you'll also notice that it stops here. That's not a distance threshold. You can set a distance threshold here, and if I bring that all the way down, you can see the distance threshold kick in, but that's backface culling. So if I turn off backface culling, it'll put it everywhere. But with backface culling on, you can limit it not to go in places where you wouldn't see it, which also makes quite a bit of sense. We also would like this grass to start before the rock. For that reason, I'm actually going to put the focal length all the way down to the point where it starts before the rock, but not so high that it goes everywhere. So you see here, that's about right. This is already looking quite a bit more realistic with the grass in the background. Of course, this rock is still stylized, and so is the moss, so we'll have to switch that out. But this glass model, once you render it, it does end up looking quite good. Now I'm going to move on to the rocks. Unfortunately, I'm going to get rid of this lovely texture I made, and I'm actually going to go to Polyhaven. Polyhaven.com. But I'm going to go to textures, and I'm going to find rock texture. Now I want just a plain rock texture, maybe moss, but I'd rather not moss. I think rock surface might work. So I'm going to download this in 4K. I'm going to get rid of that and add a new texture. And I'm just going to drag and drop textures from this, but I'm going to put it on my other screen so that the window doesn't close. So that's what I'm doing. First one, diffusion. Diffusion goes into base color. Displacement will go into displacement, which is over here, and it will go into displacement, but I will add a displacement node which will go here, and it'll do the displacement that way. And then I'm going to add normal. Normal goes into normal via bump, I believe, roughness. But then I'm actually going to Control T. Control T won't work unless you have Node Wrangler enabled. I'm going to plug the vector into the vector of all of them, including that one. But that looks decent. Okay, I'm going to go to the rock. I'm going to do that. I'm going to get rid of this, and I'm going to go to my library. I'm going to find blank haircat moss and scatter selected. Didn't mean to scale it, but it does obviously need some scaling. And since everything else is 4.5, I'll put that to 4.5 also. And my distribution density, we need lots of this. We need lots and lots of this. My scale could go all the way down to 3 maybe. That looks fairly realistic. Remember that what we're seeing is 50% of the reality. I will also turn on a distribution slope effect, so that'll stop it from going on the underside, but strength I'm going to turn it down because moss does grow on the sides of things, it just doesn't grow underneath things because of light. This will end up being quite dense. They do end up clipping, so I'm going to add an effect layer proximity, and I'm going to set this to the cup. Now you can see there's no moss by the cup, but we don't want it quite that harsh, so I'm going to make sure that there is moss, but it's just not under the cup, and we can even hide the cup. We just need there not to be any moss where the cup would be, but outside of that there does need to be moss. Great, there is now no moss inside the cup, which is good. I need to add some debris. Debris is always fun. I'm going to go to my library, I'm going to add some debris sticks bark small, and I will get rid of this blank haircat moss. I'm going to select the scale to be 4, and then density to be lots. A debris doesn't stick to a slope, so we're going to have to add a slope modifier, another one, and the strength of this slope modifier, add effect layer, slope. That looks about right actually, but I'm going to turn the strength down because we do like having lots of debris and it kind of fills in the gaps. I could add some wood moss, and the fact that it's smaller means that it'll make a layer underneath this that adds just a little bit more underlayer. Camera culling is not enabled with these, but I'm scared that if I re-enable it, issues will happen. Now, the other thing I was going to show you is the Musgrave texture. In most places there would be some gaps, and it wouldn't quite be a perfect line on this slope and stuff. So I'm going to add an effect layer on the distribution. I'm going to start with the haircat moss, and it will be Musgrave. And I'm also going to just put the same texture on all of them. It's going to make the rock look quite bare, which it will at first, but then if we turn the scale way down, 0.2 or something like that, then you get the issue, it doesn't always like generating. So we can scale through the seed till we find one a bit like this, where the moss does kind of come up to the glass, and we can add a bit more with the color ramp here, and this is starting to look realistically like how moss on a rock would look. You can see our sky texture is already that HDRI that I showed you earlier, but we are going to turn it around because that will give us a lot more dramatic lighting in our scene. So we're going to go from object to world, and we're going to go Control T, and we're going to go rotation. I think it's the Z rotation that we want. Kind of rotate it until you find something that looks nice. I like this. You're kind of looking into the sunset, which is nice. Now I'm going to save everything and do a quick test render. That doesn't exactly look realistic, and neither does this really. And of course you can see this just coming out of the rock, which is an issue, and I will add debris. I'll make the debris go further than the rest of it because that will help with that aspect. I think I might add a backstop because obviously there's not as much grass on the back side of the camera as there is in front, so some of these reflections won't be quite perfect. Make that its own thing, and maybe that's helped it. Okay, this isn't too bad. I'm going to add a plane, shift A, mesh, and plane, and R1 90, edge select. I'm going to add that edge, and ESY. Yeah, I'm going to add a hole. Probably a terrible answer to the problem. I can't bother to set it up with textures, so I'm just going to do this. Okay, that isn't bad. That's really not bad at all. Nowhere near as bad as my large scale environment scene. I actually think I might know what is missing. This background doesn't really match the rocks. The rocks say forest, the background says meadow. I'm gonna add some ferns. I think some ferns might just change it enough. Wait, that's way better. That is actually, ferns were the answer to all of my issues. It's gotten so much better. It's gotten way better. I'm gonna change my camera properties again. I'm gonna turn the f-stop f1.8 maybe. I want to see the texture on some of this. Yeah, you see this? That's way too smooth. No cameras can do that. You need some noise in there. So I'm just going to turn off denoising, but I'm going to turn samples to like 256 or something way higher. This will probably be my thumbnail image. I'm going to put something here because having something in the way of this terrible rock will really help. So if you clicked on this video expecting me to solve this issue, I'm sorry, you got clickbaited, because this rock's going to be there forever. I cannot be bothered to fix the rock. But other than that, I would say efforts have been successful. This looks fairly realistic. These sticks and stuff, they look like mess that would exist in real life. But well, thanks for watching this process. I will leave links to Gscatter, well, the Grasswald website, which is where you get Gscatter and all these assets I've used, because of course I didn't make these assets, they're Gscatter assets and they're great. I don't know where I'd be without them. The glass, I made it myself, but it's really simple. It's just an extruded cylinder. I also sculpted the rocks myself. The texture was from Polyhaven, so was the HDRI, and that's it really. Thanks for watching. Now I've just got to wait till this finishes, so I don't know. You can sit there in silence. You can watch this little number in the corner. It's gonna keep on going up and up. Well, I'm not sure if it's gonna keep on going up. It seems to be stuck. No, it is going up. This is projected to take another 1 minute and 19 seconds. So, not sure how many of you will stay here until that finishes, but if so, you've lost 1 minute and 2 seconds of your day. But you can see that the noise is starting to disappear on its own. You don't need denoising if you've got lots of samples. Same as a long shutter speed in real life. Of course, that wouldn't be totally realistic because you can't quite get a long shutter speed with an aperture of 1.8 unless it's actually getting dark out, in which case you wouldn't have this glint of sunlight on here. So that's not totally realistic, but this noise here, that noise is realistic. Well, it's not really realistic. It depends what kind of camera you've got. I know Sony cameras like to have little specks of red and blue. I don't really know anything other than that. I think Canon cameras are probably similar.